Hello and welcome to Esports Playmakers. I am joined today on the desk with Mike Wilson, I'd say co-founder of Boise State Esports. Mike, how you doing?
I'd say founder.
Founder, bold of you.
I'm doing well. How are you, Paul?
Oh, pretty good. It's been a short day in Oklahoma. It is now 6 p.m. on Monday, October 19th. I just wanted to bring you on today to talk about the origin story, basically, of, for one, my esports career, and I guess kind of that of where Boise State is today as well.
It's a cool story. It's a long story.
It sure felt like it at some points in that year. Let's start with the very beginning. You had been at Boise State for about a year, correct?
Yeah, I transferred to Boise State midway through my freshman year, and I think it had been about a year when we moved in together.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I think I had come down from University of Idaho. I spent a year there, transferred down, went to Boise State part-time for a semester. And then in August 2016, I think I started full-time at Boise State.
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right.
I think there was a point where I think what really stood out to me was from U of I to Boise State. I remember there being this super cool tight-knit League of Legends club, and I was really surprised when that didn't exist at Boise State, because League of Legends club at U of I at the time was actually the biggest club on campus. So it was really surprising coming down to a larger school and seeing that there wasn't any presence. But I remember the reason that was that the League of Legends club had disbanded actually the semester before I became a full-time student.
Was that due to university regulations, or just not enough participation?
That was actually I think I remember telling you about this. It's been years, but it was the former president of the club had left without electing a new representative to the club.
So then university regulations, because I remember how crazy they were about the club stuff. You had to check all these boxes, and if you didn't, you kind of got unfounded as a club.
I think I remember there were rules about if you didn't follow your own constitution, they would check up on it. They would actually disband your club. And the rules of the Boise State League of Legends club constitution stated that the next president had to be elected within a certain time frame. When that election didn't come through, and the last president left the university, they no longer had a club and they were no longer officially recognized. So there was this entire group of students who were in the club that were just kind of scattered around. No one really knew how to get the club back. And then I remember stepping in as what I thought was going to be a temporary position to reinstate the club as president. And then I think that's where the rumors kind of started. If I recall, it was you who reached out to me and were like, hey, I heard we kind of talked about the League of Legends club, and then you reached out to me saying that there was rumors of an esports program starting at Boise State.
Yeah, I remember it was, I was driving around Boise, and I got a text from someone with a link to a Boise State website where they had just put up a splash page of esports is coming to BSU. And then there was a single text field, if you remember, and it was put in your email and a message, and it was going to get sent to Chris.
Oh yeah,
and I sent that to you. I was like, dude, this is stuff. We should do this and make sure we get a hold of him. And we both sent a message to that thing, but 3 or 4 days went by without hearing anything. So I think it was you that just went out and found him on campus or found his private email and was like, hey man, I'm serious about this. You need to reply to me.
I can't believe I did this back then. This is actually kind of a meme now in the esports coach community, is the resume that people will send to people, or that
I got those even as club president, dude. It's the TESPA club president, not even Boise State Esports president. I'm sure you guys get so many of them.
Speaking of TESPA, how did you end up getting involved in that? I remember we had the League of Legends club, which wasn't really a part of TESPA because League of Legends is not a Blizzard game. But I remember you specifically being the person who was interested in TESPA games. Do you remember how that got started?
That was kind of assigned from Chris. So we got in contact with Chris, and I think it was just that we were messaging him a lot and kind of bugging him. That he engaged with us, and he said, "You two seem passionate about this. I need it's the classic Chris method. Like if you want to help, he's going to give you a way to help, but it's going to be hard work.
Mhm.
And so if you're willing to engage and do that hard work, then you can get a foot in the door. And so I think he just said that he needed help planning something. I can't even remember exactly what it was. And we both just stepped in and started working on it. And shortly after, he knew you were the league president. And he's like, okay, sick. We need a TESPA club so that we can engage with TESPA and get in on those Blizzard tournaments.
I think
And so the conversation became, do we unify the league club and have you be the TESPA president? Or do we have two esports related clubs on campus? And the fit to split up the work, especially since we were roommates and the league club was kind of already on its own jam and really doing well, it just made sense to engage with TESPA, in a silo to create a TESPA club in particular. And so I had the bandwidth at that time to take on the task of starting a TESPA club, because there's a lot of work that you got to do, a lot of boxes to check. You got to meet with TESPA representatives. You got to learn all about TESPA and Blizzard, and then they onboard you and you start your club. And so I think that's kind of how I got assigned to it. Was Chris was like, "Hey, we need a TESPA guy. One of you two figure it out,"
looking back, I think at this point I would have done that differently. Do you think it was bad that we ended up separating out the clubs, because it kind of ended up splitting up our player base a little bit within the Boise State community and kind of segregated like League of Legends players from TESPA players? And eventually I think they got brought back together, but at least at the very beginning I remember there being like a heavy separation.
I think, yeah, it definitely got brought back together, but it at least created a situation where we're kind of like asking people, "Hey, join this Discord too,"
Yeah.
And players don't love that. They just wanted an esports club, and that's probably what we should have given them, is just the esports club rather than the TESPA club and then the league club. And because it also created a mismatch of what each club could offer different students. Like the league club, you guys ran more tournaments.
Mhm.
But the TESPA club, since TESPA gives their clubs so much awesome loot to give out at events and stuff, we held more parties and we held more events. And there was an incentive to go to these events because you could get, Republic of Gaming awesome swag. And so it kind of created a separation of those that are here just to play games. Maybe they go to the league club. And then those that are here to play games and have these events, they go to the TESPA club. And I think it would have been a more natural fit just as one esports club with a TESPA integration and a league,
I think there was
or
a point there. We had, I remember struggling personally. I'm not sure how it was on the TESPA side, finding, for one, space on campus to host events. There was like rules and regulations around that made that difficult. And then two, finding funding to even really run an event, and finding like a sponsor for like an event or something like that. TESPA always had the gear from the loot boxes and stuff to give out. But for the League of Legends Club, I don't think there was really much out there for us.
You guys were in a tough spot because at Boise State, at least, when you started a club, the university would give you a certain amount of like seed cash to get your club going. But your club had already started, so they had already chewed through the seed cash, right? So you guys, if you wanted pizzas at an event, you needed to fund that yourself, or find, or get students to help pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we had access to that, but I was actually just through lack of information on my part, didn't know about that from the TESPA side. So our club, in a similar way to yours, had to be scrappy and fundraise for cash. And the way we did that was, I think we just asked students, if you want food, chip in like $5, and we ended up getting pizzas or something like that. And then, always coming in clutch, Chris would offer the esports space to us for free, and without all the red tape that clubs normally had to cut through to get rooms on campus. Because if we wanted a room on campus, we got to reserve it X amount of time in advance, and we have to pay for it. And then if we want good internet brought to that room, we have to make sure that we get facilities to bring out those cables. And we already had an esports lab on campus, and so Chris just let us use that in exchange for basically advertising for the esports, or the gaming lab.
You just brought back one of the most frustrating memories for me trying to get things going down there. It was trying to get network in a room. I feel like was one of the most difficult tasks for clubs. You had to book, I think, about a month in advance. And like within a month, I just remember struggling to plan that far ahead. It was always like you planned something a month in advance, and then something would always happen that would force you to change the date. But you couldn't change the date if you had set it that far in advance because they had to then move network and IT, reserve you a new room and space. And like there was just so much that went into planning a single event that it was so hard, it felt like, to get anything running. Just like the massive amount of red tape you had to get through.
There's to that point, there's a lot of hoops to jump through with anything to do with clubs, probably at any university. And that's just by the nature of it. I mean, they give us a lot. They give us discounts. They give us that seed cash. But in a unique situation like the league clubs, what are you going to do when you don't have that seed cash? And also with these gaming events and with building a community as scrappy and as quickly as we were, it was hard to plan 3 months out because we didn't know what things looked like 3 months out. I mean, you have to consider that most of this started in like September of that year. And by the time we were the biggest club on campus and trying to plan events, it was like 2 months later. You know what I mean? So how on earth could we have been prepared for, we're going to need an event in an event room for 300 people 2 months from now? We didn't know what the club was going to look like 2 months from now. And so it was certainly a unique situation to be in. And I think that unique situation just didn't click with the kind of standard workflow that most clubs went through, which was a bit slower and a bit more processed.
Yeah, I think I remember there was a point that I kind of alluded to this earlier about how I became more of a permanent president than a temporary president. And it was at the very first meeting for esports. So this was, the rumors had been out. I had met with Chris and forced my way into his office. You and I were working on the TESPA club and the League of Legends club. And then he drops a day that they were going to basically announce the esports program to the like more broad student body, and anyone who was interested in attending could just show up to this room, and he was just going to talk about esports there.
It was like a week, and he announced it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, in a week we're going to announce all of esports. Get as many people there as they want to be."
I remember going to every single I remember standing up in my classrooms being like, "Hey, if you think esports is cool, like go check out this meeting." It's just like whatever soapbox I could find.
Psychology, dude, get out of here.
Yeah, definitely got some weird looks in the business building. And then that was the meeting where I realized like this is where we like needed to hold our election. It was like we're gonna have everyone who's interested in gaming in one place. I put out like a Google form on like if you're interested in being president, like enter into this, your first name, last name, like all this stuff. I didn't get a single response. And so there was a moment we're sitting there like in the room. We had a League of Legends meeting specifically in that room an hour before the esports meeting was going to start. Walk up to the front. I think you're right there behind me at the time, if I remember correctly. It was
or sitting front row.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Talking to like about 50, 80, somewhere between like 50 and 80 students in the audience and being like, all right, so we're going to hold our elections. No one else signed up to be president. And I think I had like a very awkward, like, I have to like have like a vote. It was part of the Constitution. So I was like, so who's okay with me continuing to be president? And like half the room just very awkwardly, like confused, looked at me, like raised their hands. I think I even like tried to like coax someone out of the audience to like come down and, you know,
really?
Be a contender. I really didn't want to be president.
Yeah.
I think we probably talked about this a ton at the time, but I wasn't really interested in being a student leader. I just wanted to play video games. That was my entire thing.
I remember when like that link got sent out and you were pestering Chris. It was you wanted to be involved as a player level, and at the time we were huge into Overwatch. And I was barely diamond at the time or something like that. Like I thought I was good, but you know, there's so many better players than myself. And I remember actually when I messaged Chris through that website, it wasn't for, hey, let me be involved at the club level. It was, hey man, you need a coach? I can coach Overwatch. Let me coach for you. Like, are you paying coaches? I'll coach.
I think I did the same thing. That was what my resume was about. Was I was looking at like being a manager, not necessarily a player, but like there's no way like you can allow. I think it's almost dangerous to let students give or have authority over other students. They have to be like in a very, very different mindset in order for that to happen. And I don't think you or I were at the maturity level for that to happen at the time.
Well, Chris put it well. It's you can't have authority over the students. It needs to be from a service model, right? And that's how we structured the club's constitution was how can we as the student leaders serve you and create an environment to where you're not only enabled to play the games you love to play, but you feel awesome doing it. You feel celebrated like never before, like most students would not get unless they're playing traditional sports. And you have access to a community of people that want to feel the same way and want to play the same things you do. So I think that's where to that difference of students having authority over other students, it just has to come from a place of service of how can I enable you?
So kind of circling back, you were trying to be the Overwatch coach. I remember, I think you were actually at the time being coached by one of the players who ended up representing us at Colorado, DreamHack.
Carried by, I think not coached.
Carried by. Gotcha. I think you learned a thing or two along the way.
Sure.
There was also talks of a League of Legends team going to that DreamHack that just ended up not happening, unfortunately. And I remember being super bummed out about that, and like even trying out for the Overwatch group, despite not really playing Overwatch at all. I think it was like mid-plat on a Lucio One Trick account.
Something like that.
Something like that.
If you were lucky.
If I was lucky, yeah. Had to be a good day for me to be plat. But I think there was a point where you and I both realized that it was going to be really hard to be both a student leader and play on these teams. And I think you realized it long before I did. There was a time period where I remember being the student club president, assisting Doc Haskell in anything that he was planning, and then also attempting to be a competitive League of Legends player. I think back then I was probably playing the most solo queue I ever had. Never really got that far in rank, despite like the grind I was on. But I believe there was a time period where I was working from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m., going to class from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m., getting off from work, doing some club organization stuff, and then jumping on solo queue before I had to go to bed around midnight and then wake up at 6 the next day. And I did that for about a month straight.
And then every Tuesday and Thursday you had to be available to fill in case we had an Overwatch player missing from practice.
Which happened a lot in the early days, I remember.
Because everyone was so busy with their schedules.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a point that every student leader needs to remember that they're in school to be in school. The degree should always be coming first, and if you're ever overworking yourself, you need to kind of cut back on those hours and just remember, like, esports is a great avenue for engaging in your community, learning new skills that you might otherwise never have a chance to, but the degree should always be coming first. And there was a point where you had an intervention with me to remind me of that.
Intervention sounds formal. It was more of a structured dinner.
Very nice.
I remember that conversation, and it was, I think, more of a just conversation about burnout and the ways in which that happens. And to your point, you were engaged at every level of the thing, right? Of the machine. You were playing, you were participating, and you were trying to build the process through which players would play and coaches would participate. And so it just wasn't sustainable, I think. And that's probably true for any student leader that tries to do it all themselves, build the club and be in the club and play and maintain a high rank in any of these, ranked queues, as well as take a fair amount of credits. I mean, if you're a full-time student, it's called full-time for a reason, because in theory, between your classes and your studies, it takes up most of your time. Now, whether or not that was true for me, I don't know. But that's still, it's meant to be the case. And esports as a club or as a hobby should be that. It should be that avenue through which you sharpen skills that you don't normally have. It should be that avenue through which you can enable and celebrate your friends that also enjoy that space. But to your point, that's where it should stop. And you should make sure that you're focusing on that thing that you're there at university to get, which is that degree, which is that expertise in whatever field you're studying. But if they happen to go hand in hand, if you're a business major and you're sharpening a lot of awesome public speaking and management skills through esports, then all the better, right? They don't have to be either or. They certainly go hand in hand in a lot of cases, especially due to how broad esports is. There's a million places for someone to fit in with a million different passions, right? You have production, you have playing, you have management, you have coaching, you have so many different places. And we saw that even in the early days of Boise State Esports. There was never a time where I had to turn a passionate person away saying, no, sorry, we don't have a place for you to help right now. You know what I mean? There was always a spot that someone could engage in if they wanted to.
I believe this is my understanding. I remember at the height, like the most hype moment of the early days of Boise State Esports was when we did get to go to DreamHack Denver. You got to go to the event, if I recall, right? I was still back home with the rest of the students, but I remember watching with a room full of, I think, around 30 people, all gathered around a little tiny projector to watch Boise State play Overwatch on a quote unquote big stage in DreamHack. What do you think was like? What was the experience like there at the time? I guess like that was kind of the very early days of even collegiate Overwatch at that point.
Yeah.
Was the mood like different than what you think it is today?
Well, I think first of all, I won the straw poll, so I was the lucky one of the two of us that got to go with the team. I wasn't engaged as a coach. I was simply the TESPA leader at the time.
And emergency substitute.
What was that?
And emergency Hanzo substitute.
Hanzo main, yeah. But I was also, and I was engaged with that team pretty closely because I was helping to facilitate their practices. So Boise State Esports then and even now engages professional players to coach their teams. And really my only role was to make sure that that was a seamless process. And even then, Doc was doing a lot of that. I was just there to assist him. So me getting to go to DreamHack was not out of necessity, and it was probably just out of sheer luck on my part. But I tried to make myself useful while I was there, and so I documented a lot of it, and I took a lot of photos. And I was just generally trailing the team like a photographer the whole time. And it created this awesome experience to where people from a third party, not knowing who Boise State was other than maybe our blue turf, right?
Yeah.
Saw these players in jerseys getting followed by a cameraman with their coach trailing with them as they head to the stage and as they walk around DreamHack Denver. And there were so many moments where people came up and they're like, oh my gosh, guys, I just saw you play. That is so cool. They talked to them like celebrities. And that was a really cool moment for these players to be celebrated in a way that normally only traditional sports players are celebrated. And so the mood was just excitement. From the other teams, it was just excitement. It was obviously something new, but it's one of those moments where you know that you're in the special place where you're at the early stage of something that's going to be huge, right? Because it wasn't a huge event. It was a little backstage at DreamHack Denver with maybe 50 or 100 spectators and some live camera people and announcers. And that was kind of it. Like we were just roaming around talking to the other teams. And it was kind of funny. I found the same version of myself, but for Colorado. And me and this person talked about what building the community was like and what building the team was like. And they thought it was pretty awesome that I had brought the camera to photograph and video the team. But the mood was just excitement. It was just, holy crap, this is something really cool. And how neat is it that these players get to be celebrated like this and I get to be a part of that. Whether or not that shifted, I would doubt it. I haven't been. You were the one that went to the later events, so maybe you should answer what you think the mood was like at those. But I would guess that, we're only 2 or 3 years into this. We're still in the early stages. We're still in the special place of, holy crap, this thing's going to be huge and it's going to be really awesome. And I get to be one of those people that helps build it. Was that kind of the mood that you felt when you went to Las Vegas with the team? You went twice, right?
Yeah, I went to. Did I go twice? No, I went to Las Vegas once,
Mm.
and then to Harrisburg once. So I got to travel twice
Okay.
with the team. But I think both times definitely had that same kind of energy. Harrisburg, I think more so than Vegas. Vegas was like my team went, it was just gonna be Boise State versus UNLV.
Mm.
Um, it was a really fun show match. We had a great time. The production felt super like it was crazy well done. They had like hype videos. They had the really like cheeky intro of like people like mean mugging and like turning at the camera and stuff. And it was a great time. There was also some like trash talk segments too. Like it felt like the very first like it felt professional. Like honestly, that's the
Yeah.
best way I can describe it. Was it felt like something that a professional production team would put on. Um, so it was a super cool event. But really, I think what was amazing was the very first time we got to go to like an esports event rather than an esports competition, which was Harrisburg NACE, NACE convention in Harrisburg, 2019. Um, funnily enough, I actually met the current director of Oklahoma City University's program there
Oh,
without
really?
realizing who it was, and without him, like we had this really funny moment where like we realized we had met before when we eventually ended up meeting up here. But that was probably a super cool experience because we were there to play against Harrisburg in a show match, but at the same time we got to check out all these different panels, conferences, and sessions. And you kind of said it earlier about how esports is still on this forefront of like it's going to be something big and it isn't quite there yet. Um, the people on panels at that convention have been doing it for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
So the old guard is 2 years old in esports.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like when we were at Denver, Doc Haskell put me up on a panel about building collegiate esports programs, and I'd been doing it for like 5 months at the time, if that. And at the time, I think it was Utah was the biggest, and they had a representative on that panel, and they had been doing it for a couple of years themselves. Like everyone is so new and carving out their own way to do it in their own, niche in this space, which made it so exciting and so cool
Mm-hmm.
because I would say at Boise State, especially the way you and I ran the club, we were doing something pretty unique. Even though it had only been, 2 years for most of these other programs and everything was pretty new and unique, I'd say Boise State took a pretty fresh look at it. And our club took a pretty fresh look at how do you build an esports community in a sustainable way.
Mm-hmm. I guess kind of moving on to the next topic here. There came a point where you decided to step away from collegiate esports, and kind of handed off the TESPA chapter to the next students. And I, around the same time, decided I wanted to be competitive, so I ended up handing off the League of Legends club to the next students as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what kind of drove you, not necessarily away from esports, but what made you want to kind of pass that on, and rather than continuing to pursue it as like a full-time or as a full-time thing alongside your full-time student career?
Yeah, I think so. I passed it off transitioning from junior year into senior year of my undergrad, um, and creating or having enough time was my primary concern. It's a space that needs a lot of servicing. It was a club that needed a lot of work and a lot of time and just a lot of engagement from whoever and the team of people that were going to be running it. And so, in order to do my studies justice to that point of making sure I get what I came for, that degree, and also making sure that the club has got enough, the attention it needs, that's why I decided to hand it off. And at the time, there was this cohort of, sophomores and juniors that were so passionate about it, that were engaging with me every day about ways to improve the club and their opinions about this or that. And I was just like, honestly, I can't feel better about passing it off than to this group of students who obviously share my same passion for it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a natural time for me to engage with the helping build it. Okay, awesome. Now I really got to go focus on graduating, but I'm going to hand you the torch and you keep running with it because you have some really great ideas to run with. And I think I remember talking with you, and that's a similar way that you felt, was that it was just time to focus on for you, it was being competitive and playing, which was the piece, if you remember, that you came here to do, which
Yeah.
was play the game, right? And there was another set of equally passionate people in the league club that you could hand the club off to.
Do you ever feel like that you missed out on anything by giving up esports at the time, or like do you wish that you had like stayed in it despite the hard work it would have caused you?
No, I think they did fine with the club, and it was fun to engage with it just as the spectator, just as the person that got to go to the event, right? For the first time, it wasn't 7 days of holy crap, I'm stressed right before an event. It was like, hey, Friday night, I should go watch Boise State Esports play. You know what I mean? Like that was a fun take on it, was to be the spectator and see kind of the results of all that hard work, and get to enjoy them just as a super casual level.
I think this is kind of going back quite a ways, but do you remember taking on roles that you were 100% just not comfortable doing and just kind of jumping in anyways? I think the biggest example I can think of, kind of a funny memory, is you and I casting Heroes of the Storm together.
Don't remind me of that. What was the hero? I still don't
like
know. It shows how much I learned. There was a hero named like Cromie that I mispronounced the entire time I casted the game. And later the Heroes of the Storm players came up to me and they're like, you realize it's pronounced whatever it was. Gosh,
Take a guess right now, 50-50. What was it?
I'm going to go with Cromie now.
We'll see.
I don't know.
We'll see.
I probably got it wrong again, knowing my luck. But to your point, I think esports in general, it takes that mindset of, I don't know how I'm going to solve this problem, but I have to just figure out a way. And that's seen in so many different industries. But with an industry as young as this one, and with the amount of like just various arms there are to the beast, right? You have to just kind of say, okay, well, I don't know how to start an Instagram page for my club, but I'm going to, because TESPA needs a social shareable, and here we go. Or I don't know how to get 300 people interested into coming to a single room on campus on a Wednesday night, but I'm going to figure out 3 different ways to make it happen. And sure enough, here they are. Here's all the attendees. So it kind of just takes that mindset, I think, in general across esports.
So kind of looking back again on the club and the status of where you ended up leaving it off, do you want to say, like, what do you think that your individual biggest contribution to the esports club was?
I'd say, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'd say both of our contributions was really figuring out what doesn't work. It was like, it's a space where we hadn't done it. No one at Boise State had done it. We had talked to people that had done it, but there was a lot of learnings that we just had to have on our own, figure out what worked, what didn't work at a community level, right? How do you build community leaders in a sustainable way? Because gaming in general can be a really quick moving place. People lose interest in a game, or tempers get heated over a ranked match or something. So how do you create a sustainable community? We had tons of experiences of, oh, this worked, this did not work. And so I'd say the main contribution we made was just kind of stumbling through and really figuring out what did not work, and then passing those learnings off to the next generation, which is probably why it made it so valuable for us to step out after like a year, is that the next group only had the learnings from us, right? They only had, here's what really works, now run, go off. They weren't jaded like we had possibly become. They were just excited, and then they were armed with this, here's how to do it. So I would say that was easily my biggest contribution to this space. Would you agree that that was close to yours, or what would you say your biggest contribution was?
For me, I think it was being able to assist the production side of Boise State Esports. My not full-time but full-time job while going to school and while doing all this club stuff was working at a nearby convention center, where I was learning how to do all kinds of production things with lighting, microphone setups, just like so much like random audiovisual knowledge that I actually ended up being able to bring to Boise State's arena when it ended up getting built. So I think that was actually probably where I ended up being the most helpful, was adding in kind of this wow and pizzazz to a lot of what Boise State ended up broadcasting, or at the very least just having in their physical space. I won't deny that like what we did was really valuable.
I think that proves well our different levels of engagement. You give a really solid, tangible answer on the ways you helped, and I give some metaphorical guru answer as though I built something myself. Um, but no, to your point, and maybe that's a good transition to talk about. Do you want to talk about, Boise State, what you kind of helped form as far as the production side of it? I'd say we took a pretty different approach than most universities, and a lot of that came from Doc Haskell's vision of it. But you certainly helped influence that. Do you want to speak to the what you helped shape for the production?
The biggest thing was just like I remember Doc Haskell came to me after I think I casted a match and was like, surprising to me, I don't think I'm a great caster. He was very happy with my analytical knowledge of League of Legends, and he wanted me to create a show basically for Boise State called Fight Club Fridays, which doesn't really exist in show form today, but still exists at the club level as this very fun community event where every single Friday night the League of Legends club gets together and plays 5 versus 5 customs, and then occasionally they'll swap it up with something crazy like Among Us or something like that. But at the time, Fight Club Fridays was a way for us to throw out a collegiate scrim. We'd play someone like Oregon, one of like the other local universities. I think we played University of Utah once. But what we'd do is we'd just play them in League of Legends, and then have Adam, a local caster who was like a radio personality in the area, come in and do the play-by-play, and then I'd be there to do the analytical side of League of Legends. And I think that was like what really brought on kind of probably formed Boise State's broadcast in the end, was that style of really modeling ourselves after the professional broadcast of League of Legends, and then building a like language that was very readable for any viewer. We wanted anyone to be able to come in and be like, there's 2 colleges playing, what are they playing, what game is this, how does it work? So made it like this very friendly, open to the public as much as we possibly could. Just come in and embrace esports. Like, this is what it's all about. Like, just competition. And I think that's probably what I ended up contributing the most to production. Outside of like just the lighting and stuff like that.
Esports has to be like soccer. I mean, you can walk up to a soccer match having never seen it before, and about 5 minutes in, figure out, okay, I generally understand what's happening here.
And now
right?
you know why Rocket League is so popular.
It's an infinitely harder task to kind of get that same level of easy onboarding to most video games, especially one like League of Legends, where there's floating crystals and people shooting lasers and a fox with 9 tails. Like, it's just hard to figure out. And so I think what you guys did well was create a space where a player's parents could come in and generally understand the ways in which their player was succeeding and failing at playing the game, in the same way that a football player's parents gets to go and watch them either succeed or fail in the play. The Boise State production that you guys built created a space where, the parents could show up and with a quick onboarding video or some quick shareable tidbits about the game, understand A, the purpose, and then B, with some color casting, understand the ways in which their player was doing well or not. And I thought that was really neat.
You just remember giving me a very funny memory. My mom coming up to me after matches and being like, oh, you played that one really well, or like, oh, you didn't do a very good job, did you? On the games I would feed, where like the casters of Boise State did such a great job of like bringing in casual viewers that even my mom, who had never played games in her life outside of like Pong on the Atari, like able to understand when a player was doing well versus when a player wasn't doing well in a game as complicated as League of Legends. So just like a funny little tangent there. I think we want to kind of jump into this next point, which is we've kind of touched on it a little bit. Do you think that the best thing that club leaders and student community leaders can do at this point is to stumble through it? Or would you think that there's enough resources out there at this point that we can kind of avoid the stumbling blocks that you and I ran into and allow them to find, their own, or I guess not find their own way of doing things, but to follow what was successful and then overcome their own unique problems that will inevitably arise out of esports?
Well, I think you kind of answered it in the question, which is certainly there's enough resources available to set the foundation, get the groundwork out. But every university is going to be unique. they're going to have their unique problems, right? They're going to have their own way that they handle clubs. The student body is going to be unique. It's either regional or representative of that community. And we see that all the time. I mean, even if we look at gaming clubs across the country, the games they play are significantly different, right? Some have a heavy focus on Smash Bros. Some have a heavy focus on League. Some are Overwatch or whatever it may be. And so every community is so unique that there's probably not a way to write a book on just how to do it and have that book be all encompassing, comprehensive, all you're going to need, right? Certainly there's some awesome resources out there, and books even have been written of how to build collegiate esports clubs, but every student leader especially is going to have to stumble through and figure out what works for my community and what doesn't. I mean, if you remember when we first started Boise State Esports, we sent a community, we appointed a community leader for every game. We had one for Overwatch, one for League, one for Rocket League, and that player was the representative for all the Rocket League players in the club, and then there was another player that was the representative for all the League players in the club, or the Overwatch players would be a better one. And so we found that worked really well just for our community because we had so many players. We hit like 300 club members so quickly, if you remember.
Yeah, it was a little intense.
That there was no way that you or I, as club leaders, could create an event that would entice the Rocket League players and the Overwatch players, right? It was either going to be a Rocket League event or an Overwatch event, or you'd have Rocket League players show up for the first half and be like, don't worry, Overwatch players, your tournament's coming. You know what I mean? Because we didn't have enough computers to have multiple tournaments going on at once. And so that I found really helpful, to have those kind of heads of the different games to give us input, to say, here's the things that my players want to engage with, and here's the things that would bring them out to an event. And we found that really successful for Boise State Club. Would that work everywhere? Probably not. You know what I mean? There's going to be clubs where just different formulas work. So yes, there's a lot of resources out there. And if you are a student leader looking to start an esports club, Google it, talk to people, email people, engage with TESPA leaders. Like, that's how I figured it out. It was just like sending Discord messages of, hey, how did you do this in your club? Like, those communities exist and they're there for a reason. And then you just go and stumble through and try things. You know what I mean? That's all you can really do.
I think on that, my best advice is just to be analytical and be critical, or always be critically thinking about what is unique about your community and how can you best bring what your community needs to them. There was going back to me being a possible emergency substitute in Overwatch, there was a time period where I remember always listening on scrims, and we had this coach, who I believe still coaches Boise State Overwatch to this day, Shifty, who would be in comms and he would say, or Doc Haskell in particular would always ask him a question and be something along the lines of, is Sombra good on this map? And Shifty's answer every single time without fail, well, it depends. To the point that Doc used to always joke about it. I mean, like, I know you're going to say, well, it depends, but like, usually. But that's really what it's all about. You'll never find an exact answer to every single problem you're going to come into. A lot of it will be it's going to be it depends. And you're going to have to analyze the problem, figure out exactly what the best solution is for your university. You can look at other models, but it's good to always remember that you are a unique situation. You have a unique problem. You're going to have to possibly tackle it in a unique way.
I think it's worth touching on while we talk about what makes the tip I would give is just talk to other universities a lot. I mentioned those TESPA communities. I was just talking to other TESPA leaders that had clubs forever. I mean, you can get in contact with all these club presidents, but that set the foundation of so many things down the road. Scrimmages, if you remember, like, all we would do is just reach into our pool of, hey, we know so-and-so from this school, let's scrim them one night. So that applied to our competitive level. It applied to our events. We got people, interacting and engaging with our virtual events from other schools. And it applied to the in-person events that we would host, because other schools were now looking into Boise State saying, holy crap, look at all this stuff they're doing. I mean, I remember the kickoff event, which was planned by so many people. And we had engaged with so many other universities and talked to them. that we ended up with like, what was it, like 1,000 viewers on Twitch at one point, looking in to say, holy crap, this is a cool space to be.
Yeah, and that kickoff event was an absolute, I think, huge success for the limited resources we had at the time. Also a giant stress for me, as it was my very first loss on a stage. I'll still get mad over, I'm not sure if Luther will ever watch this, but you're dang Nidalee, man. I swear, I was taking your entire team, and your dang Nidalee came after me. But what were you gonna say there?
Funny. Oh, I was just gonna say, and I think that's by virtue of the club talking to other clubs. You know, I mean, it's student leaders talking to other student leaders. That's the way it works best. But yeah, his Nidalee kicked your butt.
I think that kind of wraps up what we were trying to talk about. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss at all? Some like just random unique gaming topic that you're interested in? Gaming animation, your major that you popped up with at Boise State, just anything in particular you want to talk about?
Talk about my Hanzo skills, but
you're gonna throw out the 1v1 call?
The what?
You're gonna throw out a 1v1 call? Try a little money match against the viewers of the podcast? I think you're throwing down right now.
At this point, it's been too long.
Yeah, you're washed up. All right. Well, is there anything you'd like to plug then?
I don't have anything to plug.
I got
my boy Soulpan.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Twitter. I'll plug myself for you. I'm on Twitter at callmesoulpan. Me myself, I'd like to plug the Oklahoma City University Twitch channel. Coming up this weekend, we are broadcasting the Special Olympics Oklahoma Rocket League tournament. It's meant only for their athletes, and it'll be a great little event for people who are disproportionately affected by the coronavirus. So look forward to that. But with that, this is Paul Vaughan and Mike Wilson signing off. Thanks for joining us on the first episode of Esports Playmakers. We will see you guys next time.